Welcome to the consulting rooms of Deckard and Booth. We are your cinematic sleuths investigating the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir. Today's case is none other than Manhunter from 1986, starring William Petersen, Tom Noonan, Joan Allan, and Brian Cox. Will Graham is a retired FBI profiler who, still scarred from his showdown with Hannibal Lecter years earlier, is coaxed out of his quiet family life by the sea to help catch a criminal eerily dubbed the Tooth Fairy, an enigmatic serial killer who butchers entire families in accordance with the lunar cycle.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Mean Streets, everyone. We're really thrilled to have you all with us. But before we dive into the film, I just want to say a quick thank you to all of our listeners. We're seeing the numbers grow every week, and it's really encouraging to us. Something that would be really helpful is if you are enjoying the show, do leave us a positive review over on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts, depending on where you like to listen. It really helps out with the ratings and gets us in front of more people. So do that for us if you can.
Enter the mind of a serial killer, Luke.
Manhunter.
What did you think? What were your initial impressions?
I believe I've seen all the other Hannibal films. I think there's a part of me that is a little bit uncertain if I've seen Hannibal or if I just have very vivid memories of the trailer. So I'm not sure. But this one I definitely have not seen. This was the first time for me. And my initial reaction is my God, this is the most 80s movie I think I've ever seen.
It is very much an 80s film.
Like, it's more 80s than Back to the Future, than The Goonies, than 16 Candles. It's so, everything about it is just dripping with 80s. Like, we've also been watching like Magnum PI, and Magnum PI has a lot of like 70s like fashion hangovers. Not Manhunter.
It's slap bang in the middle of the 80s. And it shows.
Yes, William Petersen looks like George Michael to me. I'm like, what is George Michael in this movie? Especially
on the beach scenes. Yes. He's definitely. I mean, those are short shorts. But, I mean, it is an 80s film, and the score is very 80s. In some ways, I mean, it's important to say at the outset, it was a flop. It was a commercial flop.
It's interesting to kind of pick apart why it flopped. I mean, the film cost between 14 to 15 million and made somewhere between 4 to 8.6 million back. Yeah. So it's, in terms of flop, like it's an absolute disaster. I was interested in the production companies. So you have De Laurentiis, I don't know how to pronounce it, De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. I think that's how you pronounce it. But they did like Blue Velvet, Evil Dead 2, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and Transformers the movie. They did Top Gun?
Flash Gordon.
Oh, Flash Gordon. Sorry, they said Top Gun. I was like, what?
No.
See that? But like, yeah, Transformers the movie, which is the one from the 80s, the incredible cartoon one. So it's like, a pretty decent production company is behind this. There was another one called Red Dragon Productions that I couldn't find any information on.
No, I couldn't either.
So I don't know what that was. I don't know if that was just a blip in time, if that was the author of the book, Robert Harris, or if that was the public. I don't know what that was, but there's literally no information easily accessible online. But it had at least one good production house behind it. So I think, is it ahead of its time? Boy, I'm not
perhaps
sure.
I'm putting it too strongly. I wonder whether, perhaps a better way of saying it is, it wasn't the usual fodder for this type of film for an audience of that time. And maybe it was a little bit too soon for something like this, because it's not long after this. It's only 5 years after this that Silence of the Lambs comes out.
Maybe some of that's part of it. Maybe the appetite wasn't quite ready for it. Or there's also a part of me that just sort of wonders if it just wasn't appealing. And I mean, one thing that we'll get into just shortly is, I know there were issues with the title, and Manhunter is a boring title.
Yeah.
And I that in and of itself can easily put people off a film. Also, Michael Mann is not a big name at this time.
Not at this time, no. Not at this time.
He's kind of his earlier career, kind of up to this point, was he had written episodes of Starsky and Hutch, the pilot for the show called Vegas, starring Robert Urich, who is a private eye show. Robert Urich goes on to play Spencer in the Robert B. Parker TV show Spencer for Hire. He was an executive producer on Miami Vice and Crime Story, which Crime Story starred Dennis Farina, who played Jack Crawford in Manhunter. And then his directorial debut was Thief, starring James Caan.
Yeah.
So Michael Mann he's very early on in his career. And I think for me that shows the most throughout this, because I wouldn't go as far as to say that this movie was a terrible movie or a bad movie, but I think it shows that it's someone early on in their writing career, in their directing career, and I think that might also be partly why this film wasn't super well received.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And Mann is very stylized. The way this is shot,
yes,
is very, very particular.
Yes,
and almost there are some frames that are just so symmetrical. It's almost mathematical in how they're composed. Especially the pretty much the opening scene where Crawford and Graham are sitting on that log thing, and the center of that is exactly, I reckon, the center of the horizon. It's perfectly framed. Some of the choices that Mann makes in this, I can see being a bit self-indulgent, being accused of being a bit self-indulgent, being accused of being a bit too stylized, and that can get in the way of the storytelling.
Mm.
And again, at the time, people were more likely to have just wanted a straightforward cop thriller.
Maybe they wanted something more straightforward. Because the thing is, for me, the style, the shot compositions and things like that was all stuff that I was loving. I actually really liked all of that. I liked a lot of the lighting composition. I liked the framings. There was a lot of interesting use of light and shadow. A lot of, what we would say noir filmmaking. Throughout this, the problems that I saw mainly came from the script. Not even acting. Most of the issues came from the script and maybe editing. So it's interesting because I think the visuals did not bother me, especially when you think, because David Lynch was initially up for the part of director.
I'd have loved that. Just as I would have loved David Lynch's Return of the Jedi. I think that would have been amazing.
Jeez, that would have been something. Do you know why he turned it down?
Why he turned Return of the Jedi down?
No. Why he turned Manhunter down? Turned it down. Yeah.
I don't think I do, actually.
The production company he was working for at the time was on contract because of Dune, and they were like, "We want you to do this film," and he was like, "Nope, it's too violent and too degenerate."
Wow, that's rich coming from Lynch.
That's what, I was thinking that. I was like, really?
How much more degenerate do you get than Frank Booth in Blue Velvet?
I mean...
I always want... I don't think you can ever take David Lynch at face value, and I wonder how much of a joke he was having there.
Yeah. Because that would have been a very, very different film.
It would have been a very different film, as would Return of the Jedi.
Oh my God, yes. It's interesting to me that I guess we can sort of kind of do the whole kind of behind the camera stuff and talk a bit about the making of a little bit more. It's interesting to me that Michael Mann also wrote this, and I have a lot of respect for the writer director figure in Hollywood, because that is one person's vision. You're seeing one person's vision across the board.
Again, something that David Lynch does very, very frequently.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean,
I agree. You are getting what that person wanted to show.
So Mann spent 3 years on the script. In some ways, you can maybe see how. In other ways, you're like, you spent 3 years on this.
Yeah.
The things that were interesting to me was that Mann spent time with the FBI's behavioral science unit. He was saying he was meeting people who really reminded him of Will Graham. He also spent several years corresponding with a murderer, a man by the name of Dennis Wayne Wallace, who had murdered some women and was a bit obsessed with them. And one of this Wallace guy believed apparently that the song Inagata Davida by the Iron Butterflies was like his song with him and his victim, and which at the end of Manhunter Michael Mann uses the song, I think, in its entirety, because it is a 17-minute song.
It's played throughout the whole climax, pretty much.
Yes. So I on those aspects, like I really respect Mann's dedication to spending time with the FBI, spending time with nasty people to really get inside and give a sense of authenticity to the work. And I don't know about how you felt, but I did feel in the writing that there was authenticity to what was happening with the scenes, like the FBI scenes and the prison scenes and stuff like that.
I agree. I think the whole film is grounded in reality for me. From the conversations that two FBI agents have together to those scenes with how they deal with Freddie Lowndes, the reporter, all that seems very, very real to me. That you should come away from a film or a book, whatever it may be, saying that man knew his stuff, but he didn't wear it on his sleeve. It didn't interfere with anything. It was just subtly under the surface.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the impression I get from the FBI scenes.
Yeah. I think it's because when we see them in action. Action being, conference table discussions about stuff. But like, you understand Will Graham as a profiler, and we see him profiling. He doesn't explain his process. We just watch him go through his process. And I like that stuff a lot, because it wasn't spoon feeding the audience. There were moments in the movie where I'm like, a little bit more detail would be very helpful, but we'll get to those a little bit later. Kind of moving away a little bit from the writing aspect. What did you think of the score? Because it was composed by a guy named Mitchell Rubini, who is most famous for a score called The Hunger, which is a Tony Scott film.
The first thing that strikes anybody about the score is the fact that it's a really rumbustious 80s synth.
Manhunter score is interesting, but very dated.
It's badly dated. It is one of the most dated things about the film for me. And there's no apart from the various post-punk songs that are used, there's no variation in the score to me at all. It is just that sync. That synth.
It is also worth noting that it wasn't just Mitchell Rubini who is involved with the score, but Mann also had a synthy punk rock band called the Reds also produce music for the score, as well as another artist called Shriekback. So it's not just Mitchell's work that's really dated, though if you do go and listen to like his score from The Hunger, the Tony Scott movie, which is that is also very 80s synth and very dated. But yeah, everyone was full 80'd out.
This film cannot belong to any other decade.
No.
The 1980s. No. And bang in the middle of it.
Yeah, the only thing that is not dated, in my opinion, would be the cinematography, which we're bringing back a familiar name. The cinematography is Dante Spinati, who did LA Confidential.
This is no matter how dated it is, it still looks fantastic to me. We'll come on to Lecter in a minute, but the brilliant white, the clinical white of that institution, it's so well thought of and it's so well presented that it becomes quite eerie, and the white becomes very suffocating. So you can understand that brilliant shot of Graham running down the spiral staircase to get out of it. I get a sense of that watching this, because it is so oppressively white. And the way that Lecter's dressed in white, so that he almost he's sort of just part of it. That's a brilliant, brilliant piece of photography for me.
I couldn't help but feel like I was seeing it echoed in other movies as I was watching one. I want to comment on the blue and the cell, because since you just brought those up. A lot of the kind of the blue tint to this movie really, really reminded me of the Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I didn't see if James Cameron had any sort of inspiration from this movie, but I'm like, I can't imagine that someone in that movie was not inspired by this movie in some way, because that blue, that dark, cold blue.
Yeah.
Even other shots, the way they're framed, like the when they're outside the FBI, I think it's the FBI building, and there's the archway and the shadows and stuff. Like, there's so much stuff that I'm like, this movie is very much, either it's Michael Mann's style influenced Terminator, or this film directly influenced Terminator 2. But I felt that influence with with this movie.
It's almost the same shade of blue.
Yes, exactly.
It's almost identical.
The other thing that interested me that I felt was like another echo was the prison cell, because that also really reminded me of X-Men 1 and 2, where Magneto is in his glass cage, because Magneto's wearing an all white uniform, prison suit, just like Hannibal. There's obviously his cage isn't Magneto's prison isn't white, but everything is clear and has that white sheen to it that
it's clinical. It's clinical.
Very, yes.
It's all straight lines and sharp edges and no color. I think that's the common thread. The fundamental essence of both those cells is the same.
Yeah.
And what I like about the cell, just to keep on about the cell for a little bit longer, is it looks like an insane asylum cell. Again, not unlike the ones in Terminator 2. Whereas
yes, oh my god, yes. Shoot, yes, you're right. Yes, duh.
So it looks like an insane asylum. Whereas the dungeon that's the only word I can think for it, that Hannibal in Silence of the Lambs is in, sort of looks like a movie set. Well, Silence of the Lambs ramps up the horror. Manhunter is all about the psychological.
The story, the way the story sort of unfolds is like I said, I think the biggest hiccup I have is that like I said, it feels like someone who's just early on in their career, and I know he spent 3 years on it. Maybe another year would have been good. I don't know. Maybe another 6 months. I don't know. But this is again where editing gets a little bit weird for me. So we have the little introductory scene where we have someone walking through a house, and it's slow and it's creepy and it's fuzzy as crap. And that is really never explained. You sort of have to assume why is it so fuzzy. And I think it's because the killer is wearing some sort of night vision.
He's wearing
thing?
Yeah. I've always taken it that he's wearing, like you see people with construction hats on. It's got a camera on stuck on the front, one of those. Yes,
and it's jarring because you're like, okay, is this just a bad looking movie? And then the next scene with Graham and Crawford is like a brilliant, beautiful scene. You're like, okay, so why was that so terrible? And the film never really goes back. I'm not saying things need to hold your hand, but this is the beginning of the movie, and you don't really go back and explain that, because what we're finding out, we find out throughout the movie, it's Francis Dollarhide who is going into this house, and he's watching these people and he murders them, but we don't ever see footage. We never see what that footage was anyway.
No, because you never see him watching it.
No, never.
I would prefer the film to start on the beach. That scene just seems to me to be a bit of a schlocky hook. Who's this fellow walking up the stairs?
Yep.
The book certainly starts with Graham and Crawford on the beach, and I think the film should have done as well.
Got to mention the opening credits, because they go on for forever. The music can't even last as long as the credits.
No. No.
And it's just like, deep dark synth, whoa, and you're like, okay, this is creepy, but the screen is like this sky blue, and you're like, okay, and the titles aren't really anything special, and then suddenly the score just goes down. Okay, our movie's gonna begin, and then names just keep coming up,
keep coming,
and I'm like, oh god, oh no. That was nuts to me. But once we get to the beach scene, I really like the beach scene with Will and Jack. I think that to me is like, okay, now the movie has started, and it kind of made me feel a little bit like safe. I was like, okay.
I'll tell you what I really like about the beach scene, and it's a lesson in not dumbing down your audience. There is no explanation.
Yes.
About who these people are.
Yes.
There is no explanation about their relationship necessarily until they start talking, and then it is two people who've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's no clunky exposition about their past together. All the dialogue is all geared towards two people who are in a certain point in their lives and relationship together.
I appreciated the scene for those reasons. It says a lot with little. The only thing I would have liked, my one note for that scene, is just put a goddamn name tag. Like, hey, Will, hey, Jack, just so I knew. I was like, look, this movie is 40 years old. or I don't know who anyone is yet. A name here and there would have been helpful, but I mean, it was easy enough to kind of put 2 and 2 together, though, because you're like, okay, well, the young guy's probably Will and the old guy's probably Jack. So yeah, the scene is then followed up with a kind of an out of place scene of Will and his son building a hatchery for turtles that doesn't really pay off either. I just thought that didn't need to be there.
No.
Like, who cares? You know, will they make it or whatever? Why are we here? Why are we talking about turtles? Move on from turtles. The scene after that, I really liked this shot of Molly and Jack sitting on top of in the house overlooking the ocean with that beautiful pastel sunset. Oh my God, that was like,
that's a
wonderful
painting.
You felt Molly knew Jack and Jack knew Molly, and he's kind of like, I gotta do it, and she's like, F you. And but it's all subdued, and you kind of you feeling the tension there.
Yeah, and I like the fact again that she doesn't say anything along the lines of, not after what happened last time to him. Or, you know, him saying, I promise what happened last time won't happen again. Because they both know what happened last time. We will find it out. You have to trust that we will find it out later, but not in a contrived way of them now talking about it. I respect that as a piece of screenwriting. Yeah,
the restraint on that side I thought was impressive, because there was a part of me that's kind of like, you could spoon feed a little bit here, but the fact that they just didn't, I was like, okay, interesting. I do think maybe later in the film, because there was such a lack of information and understanding of Will's experience, makes it a little bit difficult to sort of relate to or fully grasp. Though I do appreciate the scene in the grocery store, which we'll get to that. We'll get to that a little bit later. But like, I do think, so it's like, on one end, I do respect the restraint. On the other end, maybe cut the turtle scene and give us something. Maybe we're looking at a headline, something like that like can push us forward that way.
The script hasn't got that right. It's not got the balance quite right between suggestion and helping the audience along, because otherwise they're going to be confused.
Because the next scene, I think, really highlights one of the big issues with the movie. And the next scene is a cop car pulls up outside of a house. Will gets out and goes inside. You don't, as the audience, you don't know where you are. You don't know why you're there. You don't. I was like, wait a minute. I had to pause and think. I was like, did I miss something? Was there a tag on the screen that I missed that says, you know, location or whatever? Like, nothing. I was like, man, okay. So a second ago we were somewhere on a beach. Now we're not. What was the journey from beach to here? I don't need to see it. I just need to have like the Mission Impossible movies, they throw up the name of the location. Like, just throw the name there. Place us where we need to be so that we know we've moved from A to B.
Even if Will had ended that beach scene by saying, all right, Jack, I'll fly out there to Atlanta and I'll have a look, but that's all I'm promising.
So Will goes around, looks throughout the house. We kind of begin to get an idea of what his method is, and we see him sort of try to get into the killer's mind.
And we get an almost shot for shot repeat of the opening scene. He passes the same trainer and Coke can on the stairs.
It is.
He's in the same point of view.
Yep.
But this time we've got a bit more context because at least we know who it is.
Yeah.
And if that's a sort of directorial trick of saying these are two halves of the same coin, which I do wonder if it is.
It is. It would be,
because that's definitely a theme of the film. Then I think it's a clumsy one, and I think there are better examples later on in the film.
I think so too. Yeah, I liked it. I like some of this stuff. Again, I back to what we were saying earlier. Like, Will's process isn't really being spelled out for us. We're just watching him perform, and I understood it and I bought it, and I liked him figuring out that he must have touched someone, and there must be fingerprints, and wanting to get the fingerprints taken off of the bodies. Yeah. I thought that was all really really clever, really really clever stuff. I think my only issue with this kind of moment in the film, though, is at one point Will calls his wife in the middle of the night, like, just to wake her up and then say goodbye.
Yeah.
Not even like, I just wanted to hear your voice. I missed you. Nothing. He's like, honey, are you asleep? Yeah. Okay, bye. I love you. Yeah. Like, Will,
Yeah.
you dickhead.
You idiot.
That was the only thing. Again, kind of the next scene. This is a recurring thing for me. It's like location. Tell me where we are. We're in the Atlanta police station, but you don't really know that until they leave the police station and you see Atlanta police station on the outside.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, they say that they found the fingerprints on the body, but the fingerprints don't pan out. But the big kind of thing with leaving the police station is we're introduced to Freddie Lowndes, who's played by Stephen Lang, I think it is.
Stephen Lang, yeah.
And man, is he just not the embodiment of 80s man? His jacket, his hair, his attitude, he's so 80s. That it just
80s, yeah.
Really cracked me up. And basically what we find out is Freddie Lowndes and Will have a history together, and they sort of, it goes back to, you know, Will's time with Hannibal and what happened to him then. But then
sorry to interrupt you, Luke, but I think then we could have had a little bit of that backstory come out then in a bit of an argument between Lowndes and Will.
Yeah.
You know, there could have been not necessarily exposition, but a reference to it, because then it would start to become, well, what really did happen between these two?
Yes.
You know, and that would start to be a subplot that would garner some interest.
Yes. Because the scene that didn't make sense or felt out of place was Will ninja throwing Lowndes over his shoulder onto the hood of a car.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's out of place. Nothing like that happens again in the whole movie.
Yeah, it's almost as if they say, well, this is the 1980s, we've got to have an action scene, and there aren't many in this.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I guess the next scene that we come to is the first scene between Will and Lecter. Will's like, I need to go recover the mindset. And to do that, he needs to get back into the mindset of a serial killer. And the way that he can do that is he goes to visit Hannibal Lecter, who is somewhere. I don't know where he is, a facility in a location.
Yeah.
It irked me quite a bit because at the end of this scene, we'll talk about the scene, but at the end of the scene, after Will leaves, like Lowndes is there and takes his picture. So I'm like, are we still in Atlanta or are we in Virginia? Is this the FBI? Where are we? Like,
where are we?
The movie really, really fails to place you where you need to be. And I'm sitting there with every scene thinking, I don't know where I am. This is frustrating me to no end.
And it makes it seem disjointed. In actual fact, in terms of plotting, it's not disjointed.
Correct.
But it does make it feel as if Will's jumping all over the place and is able to be, 8 states apart in a matter of minutes, assuming he has moved state, as you rightly say. It's not clear at all. Why would Lecter be incarcerated in Atlanta?
Because there's a scene much later on where it turns out that the Tooth Fairy lives and works in Missouri, and then he just hops on an airplane and gets to Missouri. And I'm like, these we're going from Florida to Atlanta to Missouri to undisclosed locations elsewhere. Like, this is a lot of interstate travel that doesn't make sense to the viewer and is really hard to follow. And I think where the film's strengths lie are in its individual moments, like this moment between Hannibal and Will. We've kind of talked about the style of this scene, so I don't necessarily need to recover that. Looks really cool, and I like the two sides of it. I definitely felt there was a Holmesian vibe to Lecter, more so than what I got from Anthony Hopkins' portrayal. Both with he smells the aftershave and he's like, oh, a tan, a ship on the bottle, something a kid might have picked up. He's working out all this stuff.
He's working out what Will's life is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just from the smell of his aftershave. And I'm like, that's clever. I like that.
And he's much more,
my dear Will.
Lecter. And again, this isn't to take away from that performance at all. But Hopkins Lecter is almost a horror movie monster from the outset.
Yes.
He looks odd, he acts odd, and he talks odd. Brian Cox's Lecter is a very normal conversationalist. But as the scene progresses, you get to know that every question he's asking has an ulterior motive, and that is to get inside Will's head and find out how he can get revenge on him, essentially.
I might as well just say now, I think my only problem with Cox is not Cox himself, because I like him. Well, I like him in general. It's interesting. He's an interesting take on Hannibal. The amount of time he is with us in this film feels like something is missing. He almost there's almost an aspect of it that it's like, if it wasn't for the fact that the Tooth Fairy and Lecter correspond, if you cut Hannibal out of this story, you're not losing much.
No, you're not losing much. And Michael Mann did say he resisted the urge to put Lecter in more because he wanted the audience to want more. His quote is, "I wanted the audience to almost not quite get enough of him." And I think to myself, well, you succeeded there, Michael, because we don't get enough of him. A bit like Clarice in Silence of the Lambs, he should have gone back. Will should have gone back to see him.
Yes.
As the case progresses, because once they find out the corresponding, he never goes to Lecter to have that out with him. You know,
that would have been a perfect thing to do.
Because a perfectly natural thing to do. You've given this monster my home address and told him to go and kill my family, but I won't come and confront you with that.
Yes.
And that's just bizarre to me.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I was left wanting more. Not because what we had was so good, but because I didn't feel that I was able to sink my teeth into this version of Hannibal. I was like, hey, he's little. There's not a lot there. Dang it! I do like the after. I like that this scene triggers Will, and he has a bit of a anxiety, a PTSD attack, and runs out, and the reporter takes a picture of him. Like that was, I think that was all a really a fine finale to that moment. And then that's followed up with Lecter making a telephone call, and we see him again using his smarts to kind of do something where he's hacking the phone and gets the address to Will's by pretending to be a publisher and all that kind of stuff. So I that was like cool. It's like that's gonna go somewhere. And then it kind of doesn't. And I'm like,
it doesn't.
Dang.
And I also think, like you say, it's a nice round off to the scene where Will has to get out. But that would have been a perfect point to tell us a bit more about why he is so affected by Lecter.
Yeah.
And we don't get that. There are scenes and there are themes in this film that seem to want to go somewhere and never do.
Now things kind of heat up a couple of scenes later. Will does another look around at another house in another location. Or there was another murder that we see nothing of. I did have to laugh though at Will's one of his walkarounds through some of these houses, because even the houses were so 80s. Like they didn't even have like normal houses. They had contemporary 80s as shit houses. Oh my God, it was hilarious. So during one of his investigations, he looks in the tree and he sees this marking, and things begin to unfold. And this is when he gets the call that something was found in Lecter's cell, and a lot of stuff happens with this moment. There's this phone call between Dr. Children, Graham, and Crawford about this letter that was found on some toilet paper, and it's all
this is done very quickly. This is a lot of info that you've got to get in. You've got to take in very, very quickly.
Yes.
And I did rewind it, I have to say, to think, what we're doing here? What's happened here?
Yes, yeah, it's intense because there's so much thrown at you, and not only that, then everything just starts moving. Like Will is all over the place. He's at this house, and then suddenly he's at a lab, and suddenly people are helicoptering, the letter to Will, and they're getting it tested for DNA and fingerprints and all this stuff, and they're working through the night. And what?
And this is also that Lecter doesn't realize his toilet roll's been stolen or whatever it is. It's been removed from the cell.
Yeah, and and Hannibal is in he's not even in his cell. He's being held somewhere else, but we don't see that. And there's kind of a ticking clock element happening, but you don't necessarily feel the ticking clock.
No, you don't feel, and you don't know what have they told Hannibal to get him out of his cell? Where is he?
Yes.
And what are they doing with him while this is taking place? Because he's not the sort of person to lightly go out of his cell, is he? No, he's one of those intelligent people like Holmesian again.
Yes,
who's 8 steps ahead of everybody else in the room.
Yes,
so he knows when they take him out of that cell, they're going to go searching.
Yes,
So how are they keeping him quiet? what are they doing? That's just totally glossed over completely.
As the viewer, I'm like, I need a little bit more like context, just a little bit more context to follow.
Context is the word. Context is the word. a lot of this seems to be happening in a vacuum.
There's some really cool sort of forensic stuff that they do to recover some information from a piece of the toilet paper that's been cut off and marked out with some ink. They learn that Hannibal is communicating with the Tooth Fairy via a newspaper called the Tattler. And so then there's this quite intense meeting that again you're kind of thinking time and space and how much time, like to DNA test, to fingerprint test, to work all this stuff out, to then have a meeting about, okay, we need to put a fake message in the Tattler.
Yeah.
I'm like, how much time has passed? Also, we're apparently in DC during this time. They're like, okay, so we've gone from some location where there was a murder to now we're in DC and it's been night the whole time. So time, what time is it?
And again, for all these things, for all these tests to be done, get the results back.
Yep.
Find out what book what magazine they're using, and all the rest of it. All that will take time. And
yes.
All that time, Lecter's out of his cell.
You could have those could have been moments where you gave us a bit more Hannibal. Like, he's not a dummy, as we've said, so he would know that they're holding him, keeping him out of his cell for a reason. The next thing they do is they decide to put a fake story in the newspaper. Using Lowndes to, they give an interview. They talk about the Tooth Fairy, and they put all this fake stuff in there about his issues and impotence and all that kind of stuff. We also learn that the symbol carved into the tree is a reference to the red dragon. Then there's a scene that kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's this thing where, like, they put this story in the paper and they take this picture so that they can see Will and Lowndes in this location so they can be worked out where they are. And for some reason, they just assume that the killer will just come and attack Will there. Why?
And we don't even know where the killer is.
And we don't even know where they are. I'm like, where are we? Like, I don't know what that building is where they have that meeting. I was like, is this the newspaper? Is this some government building? Are we still in DC? Where are we?
Well, there's nothing to suggest that fake story will ever come to the Tooth Fairy's attention. It's a bit rich to say, well, you've just got to take that for granted. Yeah. Because, you can't really take that. That's an important plot point. Because what's the plan if he doesn't see it? He doesn't say he's reading Lowndes' newspaper.
Exactly. It's like, okay. I mean, unless Lowndes works for a nationwide paper, like, why would he get that? How would he get that? Like, yeah. And then I have to admit the scene of the false alarm killer was just really dumb.
The jogger.
Yeah, the jogger. Yeah. I didn't like that. That didn't work for me. That whole scene, I just thought, visually, it's beautiful. It's a really well shot, creepy looking scene that just makes no sense for the story. When the jogger just runs right towards him, what jogger does that? There's someone in a parking lot. Why you're gonna run inches away from some other person? Like, who does that? Nobody. Yeah. And then Will tackles him, and I'm like,
Will tackles him. Why? He's not even sure. He can't possibly know that he's got the right. Well, he hasn't got the right fella, so he can't possibly know it. So he just essentially just tackles a bystander.
The following scene is where stuff goes back to being interesting. The Tooth Fairy abducts Lowndes and takes him back to his house.
Yeah.
There's a scene at the Tooth Fairy's house, which, if we're following the location right, by the end of the film is in Missouri.
Yes.
So he takes Lowndes back to Missouri from wherever the hell they are. Could either be Washington, Atlanta, or wherever.
And he does it in a van.
Which, to get from Washington to Missouri, it's a long drive. The scene itself is great. The scene itself is creepy between the Tooth Fairy and Lowndes, and like the whole manipulation and is he going to kill him? Is he not going to kill him? Like, I love that stuff. And I love that line where he says, "You're an ant in the afterbirth." Just get a good sense of, oh, this guy is effed up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the line, "You owe me or."
Yes. That is a very good line. I
think that is fabulous.
Yes.
And I think Tom Noonan is great in it. I really do. I think he's chilling. And he has another great line, which is, "It's in your nature to do one thing correctly, tremble."
Yes. Yes.
And I think that is, and I love the bit where he says, "Open your eyes or I'll staple them to your forehead."
The follow-up scene, again, is like, okay, wait. because we're back at wherever Lowndes' car was, and you're kind of led to believe it's like, what, maybe the next morning or something?
Yeah, I think it's meant to be the next morning because...
But it's like we were just in Missouri.
The impression is the car's been there overnight.
Yes. And there's the scene is quite haunting, and that is Lowndes is strapped to a wheelchair. He's on fire, and he's been pushed down the bridge or down the path, and he just comes screaming at the security guard. And it's visually, it's an incredible haunting scene.
And I like the fact that you don't see. I think in the remake, in Red Dragon, the Anthony Hopkins one, I think you catch glimpses of it as it comes down the ramp, and then that works quite well. But I think this works better because you just hear this odd rumble.
The next scene we get is a kind of a shot of. It's a shot of Molly and her son wakes her up and they hear some noise, and you think, okay, this is it. The Tooth Fairy is going to attack his family. It's not. It's the cops who Will knew that was the case, so he warned the cops and they went and saved his wife. So there's no real danger there.
I don't think you need it. You need it. Again, it's one of those fake gags because it's set up as if Dolarhyde is on his way and he's outside.
Yeah,
and it's not. It's that dumb cop.
Terrible acting from that cop.
Terrible acting.
You need to go inside. You need to go inside. Oh my God, is that the best? Again, it's one of those scenes where it's like, did they just hire like an actual cop, local cop, to just?
Yeah.
What the crap?
But again, the information that you get from that scene, which is that Molly and the kid are safe, could be done in a line.
I would say smash cut to the safe house where she's PO'd, where Molly's PO'd that he's disrupted their life again, and the follow it's the bit with the cop. You just lose that for me. Yeah, lose that, because what I do like in the safe house stroke grocery scene is I like the moment of Kevin. Again, this would have been nice to have maybe seen and experienced this, but Kevin has found out about his dad's psychotic break with Hannibal and all that sort of stuff. So he's now afraid to leave his mom alone with his dad. So that's an interesting dynamic. And I also really like, Will being like, all right, I'll take the kid out and we'll have the conversation. And I found it to be a really quite lovely moment between Will and his son, explaining kind of what's been going on. And I sort of liked this being explained, not to the audience, but to a child, this really dark stuff that his dad went through. I thought that was quite interesting how that played out, followed up by, so what kind of coffee do you like?
It's presenting a series of events that most films would have shown in a violent and bloody way. And I think it's got to have credit for presenting those scenes, albeit as exposition. But like you say, the fact it's done to a child makes something graphic come across as something quite... The fact that he's telling him and trusting him with it, quite tender. And it's a way of getting across that information, which I think we should have had a lot earlier.
I agree. It came way too late in the film.
We should have seen more of it, so that this scene with the kid in the supermarket is more. I went through it, but I'm okay now. But I went through some bad stuff. You'd still get the same emotional punch, I think. But the audience would have more context. Again, we go back to context.
Because this all stems from Lowndes writing a paper, writing a story, having seen Will at Hannibal's location in mysterious location X. And that would have been interesting for us to have seen. Paper slaps down on the family's doorstep, and Kevin picks it up and reads, then we're in on it. Like, they should have done something like that, so that by the time we got to this moment, because I mean, as much as I liked the idea of Kevin trying to be this protector, I was sort of like, man, they're just sort of like, they could have shown us some of that. That could have been interesting to see, build on the family dynamic, but alas, they do not. The next couple of scenes sort of, I don't know, I feel like at this point the movie is beginning to kind of stall. We go to Gateway. We don't know what Gateway is. Of course, we don't know where Gateway is, but we are at Gateway. And I don't know it took me forever to work out what this place was. Is this a hospital? Is this some sort of like cancer treatment center? Oh, it's a place they develop film. Well, make it clearer. Make it clear, Michael Mann.
You just expected to take it for granted. And this is something we said right at the beginning of this episode. This film has to have kudos for not spoon-feeding its audience, but it has to accept the criticism that it's denying its audience any food to be spoon-fed.
The same, yes.
It's not. Is that mixing a metaphor? That might be mixing a metaphor.
Maybe.
But we're not giving it, again, credit for not telling us too much, but you've got to give us something. We've got to know who we are and where we are. Because otherwise, and I feel this very badly about this portion of the film. These are people we don't know anything about at all.
Yeah.
These are randomers.
Yep.
And it is a bit jolting when we've spent so much time with Will and got to know Will and his family that now he disappears for quite a large chunk of the film.
I feel like it's a good 20-ish minutes. Like, it's a lot, because the film basically pauses to let us learn about Dollarhide and learn who the Tooth Fairy, who he is, and he works at a film development company, and he's sort of dating this blind woman named Reba. And it's like, okay, this is all kind of interesting, but like,
well, I think it is, but I think it's important to what the film and the book are trying to do in terms of Dollarhide's character, because I think the intention is to say this man isn't just a monster. This is a man who wants to be accepted, and underneath it all, he is still a human being. He's not a universal horror monster. Sure, yes. But the problem with the film has got is it's telling us that now when we've seen too much of the monster side. If this whole Reba romance subplot had been running in tandem with the main plot, so we got to know Dollarhide as we got to know Will, then these final scenes here, because we're coming into the final scenes where he thinks she betrays him, would have a much more emotional punch.
Yes.
Because we would have seen him struggling, and this is something really that the Brett Ratner film does a lot better, I think.
Which is saying a lot for a director like Brett Ratner.
Well, quite. But Ralph Fiennes is the Tooth Fairy in that, and you do see his background, and you do see him struggle with it's Emily Watson in Red Dragon, and want to be in a romantic relationship with her, and the hair lip is a much more important plot point. That's what and that's why he's so relieved that she's blind. This just glosses over all that.
Yes. And
it doesn't have any. I can't invest in it as much because I don't know Dollarhide as well as I should.
Yes.
To accept that a man who's murdering all these men, women, and children and animals has a human side.
Yes, I totally agree. Because also at this point in the movie, like, we're ramping up towards what's meant to be like his next kill. And it's almost like, I don't know. I haven't read The Red Dragon in full in a very long time. So I'm very, very bad on the book side of this. But I'm like, well, surely if the full moon is about to happen, he should, like, he stalked these other two families. So surely he's got another family in sight.
Yeah.
Like, I'm assuming that maybe happens in the book, but here it's just like, he's just almost like he's done killing for a while. I'm like, well, I thought he was about to kill someone again. I thought that was the whole point.
Yeah, why is he not staked out in trees in the back gardens of the latest family? Why is he with Reba?
Exactly.
his whole
why is he taking Reba to go pet a damn tiger?
Yeah. Well, again, that's the show. I'll make you understand what seeing is, isn't it? That's like the old.
How does he have access to a tiger?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
I was like,
none of it works really. None of it works because we don't know enough about him.
Yes,
we're being asked to invest in and accept a side of his character that we haven't yet seen. Because the last time we saw him, he had a stocking on his head and was setting a man on fire. Yeah, so
yes.
It's a bit of a leap.
Thinking about it, doesn't that break his MO then?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
By murdering Lowndes breaks his MO. So it's like, well, I thought he only murdered on these like full moons and these families and they need to worship him, but that's not at all what happens with Lowndes. So he probably shouldn't have murdered Lowndes.
Unless he doesn't want Lowndes to admire him.
Yeah, still doesn't make. Yeah.
I don't know.
There's some inconsistency there. I guess.
But his MO is definitely different here because he should be staking out the next family, but he's not.
Should be.
He's running around with Reba.
Yes, and they, he takes her home and they bang, and it's sort of, I don't know what that does.
I mean, an advocate of this film will say the actual point is that he's struggling with the murderer side and the normal life side, and I accept that, and I agree with that, but it isn't shown clearly enough for that to be of any value whatsoever.
So I really struggle with this bit of the film. Even Will kind of going, we get back to Will for a minute and he's looking at the evidence and he's trying to get back in the mind of the killer, but you've already been doing that all this time. Why are we back to this? Like, come on. It's really, it loses me. And then we get our final scene with Lecter, and it's a phone call and it's kind of boring. Some aspects of the conversation are interesting where he's talking about, the killer, you kill because you feel like God. And like, I like some of that stuff, but like, and
I do like that when he says God is a champ.
Yes, yes,
I do like that.
And there's one aspect. There's some fun playfulness to this scene where it's like Hannibal is lying on his little bed like a 14-year-old girl talking to her boyfriend, and there's some funness to that. But it just, because we had so little of Lecter, and then this is our final scene, it's mostly a phone call and it's mostly from Will's perspective. I just thought,
sadly, because I do think Cox is good, but sadly you do think, oh, it's him again, and I've forgotten about him, whereas I don't think you ever forget about Anthony Hopkins.
Not once. You're always waiting to get back to him.
Yeah, even though he's only in it for 11 minutes or whatever it is, famously only in it for 11 minutes. He makes every single one of those count. And I don't think that's Cox's fault necessarily, because I think, as I've said before, I like the normality of Cox's madness.
Yes.
But the script doesn't give him enough opportunity to shine.
Say the next couple of scenes, we get the Tooth Fairy, or Dollarhide, is outside Reba's house. He sees with another man. He misinterprets what he sees in a very arty, crazy way, which I kind of liked. But then again, it's like, okay, well, it's full moon time. He's meant to be about to kill someone. And he sees this, and so he goes crazy. And he shoots the guy in the front lawn and then goes and abducts Reba. And I'm like, you're meant to kill someone. And I feel like the movie is like, oh, crap, he needs to start killing people now because it's full moon time. And but like, where's his ritual? He's a ritualistic serial killer, and there's no ritual being followed here.
We know he's been targeting because he's watching the home videos with Reba. So we know that he's got a family in mind. And in the director's cut, at the end, Graham goes to see this family. So why doesn't he just go and make this the worst family murder yet?
Yes.
To get rid of all this like betrayal and anger and hatred. That doesn't make sense. Instead, he just kidnaps Reba and that's it.
I do like Will's big clever moment where he works out, oh my God, this guy works for a development company. That's how these families are all connected. And I do have to say, Dollarhide's house is nuts. That weird Art Deco, like
that curtain thing.
The curtain thing, his dining room table set, the pastel green with the black trim. Again, we're saying Art Deco, but it's 80s Art Deco. It's like 80s interpretation of Art Deco. It's not even like actual art. It was the nuttiest place in the world. His house. Nuts. It is. Kind of liked it, but it was nuts. Dollarhide has Reba, and he's toying with her with loud music, so she's blind, so she can't, disrupts her senses, and he's, going to kill her. Will approaches the house, and he, for some reason, decides to jump through the glass instead of just shoot the mother effer. Why do it? Because he jumps in, and he instantly gets the crap beat out of him.
He does,
and fails.
Yeah, he does. Well, he falls in the fridge.
Yeah. Like, what's going on? Like, okay. And then, then Dollarhide gets his gun, and all the time as the cops come up, like the cops are shooting him or trying to shoot him, and they're just like blowing him, getting blown away by his shotgun. It all kind of goes a little bit far-fetched and really bad editing. But did you notice the really, really bad cuts? Yeah. Like there's all these like jump cuts where like he'll get shot, and then you can tell where they've like cut the film and placed something in that's almost the right shot, but not the right shot.
Not quite the right shot. Yeah.
And so there's this jump. There's all these jumps. That was really pulling me out. I'm like, this is your big climax, and did you edit this in like 5 minutes? Like,
it's not very well executed, unfortunately.
No. And also the kind of the final scene between Will and Jack. you don't really know what to expect, and then it just ends. There's this scene where Will is standing on a dock staring out at the water, and then Jack comes up behind him and just sort of sits down.
It just sits down.
And you're like, it's kind of mirroring the beginning, but kind of not.
It is, but it's also meant to, I think it's meant to suggest that the two of them have been through something together.
But don't really get a sense of
that.
Have
sort of bonded again. But you don't get any sense of that.
No.
You don't get any sense of that.
No.
It would have been better, because Will's been on his own throughout the whole of this film. Yeah. All Jack's really done is force him to do something he didn't want to do, and then be there for a couple of scenes.
Because then the next scene we get is we're back in Florida, but you wouldn't know that if you unless you're paying attention. We're back in Florida, and the other thing that's weird to me is they're back at that stupid hatchery, and he's like, "Did they make it?" And he's like, "Yeah, most of them." But like, at no point do we see the turtles. Do we see the shells? Like at the beginning of the movie or at the end? I'm like, why have these goddamn turtles?
And at the beginning, the kid says, "Will they make it?" And he says, "Every one of them, I guarantee it."
That's so true.
So the bloody thing didn't even work.
And then you have a very, very cheesy final scene of the family just huddled next to each other at the beach. And then it pauses on a freeze frame of like the kid throwing something.
Yeah. And
then as the credits roll, I'm just like, oh.
Well, if you'd not gathered that this was a 1980s film, you sure did with that freeze frame.
What I will say is Will Graham's wife is absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Kim Greist.
Kim Greist?
Not a lot of credits, but I thought she was pretty good.
Yeah, she is good.
Yeah,
for the role that she's got, she gives a very convincing performance, and it's a very honest performance.
Yeah, I from what she had to do, she did very well, and I think I wouldn't say anyone in this film is necessarily miscast. I think everyone did well. I just think that in general, the biggest problem is it suffers from some early writer finding their feet as a writer and some editorial things that could have just clarified a few more things. I would have peppered Dollarhide's story throughout instead of just stop the film in its tracks.
Yeah, absolutely. And what that would have done as well is solve what I think is one of the big problems of the film, and that is that it's never properly explained why Dollarhide is doing what he's doing. But all you get in this film is a very throwaway line where Will says, "If our boy imitates being wanted and desired enough times, he believes he will become one who is wanted and desired and accepted. It'll all come true." And that's it. That's why he murders all his family. It needs more depth, and it needs more context. Again, the word context.
I agree. I totally agree. It's a decent outing for a budding director. He's cutting his teeth, I think, on certain things.
Yeah, and what this film does have are glimmers, as you say, the glimmers of what will become great later with age and experience.
It's so Manhunter is, for me, it's a unique piece. Some really great acting, some really great lines of dialogue. It's as a whole, it's a little bit clunky, but I would say that it shows promise. How many Falcons would we give Manhunter?
I don't know whether to say 3.5 Falcons or whether to say 4 Falcons, and I think I'll probably go 3.5.
Slightly more generous than me. I came away from this thinking this is a solid 3. There were moments where I almost went a little bit below that, but I thought, I can't give it too close of a rating to V.I. Wysarski, so it's definitely more competent than
this
that.
This is streets ahead of V.I. Wysarski.
So.
I think between 3 and 3.5, I think is a fair assessment of this film. It's not awful. It's by no means awful. Quite the opposite. It's got a lot of stuff going for it, but it is tainted by its flaws.
Well, folks, that's our investigation into Manhunter. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you back in the consulting rooms next week. Until then, please do like and subscribe, and be sure to be careful walking down those mean streets.